As a non-believer in paranormal experiences, my view on the subject was changed by what I have witnessed today. My mom loves to check the security cam from time to time on her phone. This evening when I got home from work, she came to my room, pale as snow, and wanted to show me something. She told me that the camera was malfunctioning yesterday. At night, she had trouble moving the camera around, so she told my brother to go out and try to move it manually. The camera was recording while my brother fixed it. She showed me the footage and my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe what I just saw. I had to rewatch it at first. I thought my brother was smoking while he was outside, but he wasn't, 'cause on the footage, it showed both of his hands, making faces and messing with my mom via the camera. Now, he's not in this footage. He didn't want to be, so I had cut him out. I transferred the clip to my PC and tried to play with the video, making it brighter, slowing it down, etc. The more I worked with it, the more in shock I was. As you can see in the clip, some kind of animal jumped through the fence and vanished, and it wasn't alone. That's a wolf in the left corner, ladies and gentlemen. A huge ass wolf, as it manifested from the dark. A smaller animal jumped the fence. The wolf stayed. Or at least I haven't seen it leaving on the footage. You can see the thing has a tail, 4 legs, and having the uncanny resemblance of a dog. The camera was rolling all day, so I tried to find out what I've seen and have a look at what happened before or after. I thought it was some smoke, but there was no smoke before or after the clip. Then I thought maybe the wind was at play. There was no wind on that day. The weather was nice, even at night. We have 5 dogs. They weren't acting up or strange at all, as I recall from yesterday. Later that night, the street lamp in front of our house had broke. I finally started to accept that I might have experienced my first paranormal sighting. I want to hear your thoughts on it, because I'm very excited and scared shitless at the same time. Hi, today I will tell you my paranormal story. It happened in my grandparents' house where my great-grandfather died. Let's start from the beginning. Me and my parents moved to my grandparents' house. Strange things started happening the first night. I will say right away that I was only 3 years old then, and around 9:30 p.m. I went to bed. My mother went to the bathroom, and after taking a bath and brushing my teeth, I was in the bedroom waiting for my mother to read me a fairy tale. Suddenly, the shadow of an old man appeared on the wall and suddenly turned cold in the room. I called my mom, but before I screamed, the light went out and came on. When my mom entered the room, the shadow disappeared and the room became warm. To this day, I believe that it was my great-grandfather. What do you think about it? Do you think it's my great-grandfather or something else? Last night I was about to go to bed when I heard footsteps on the other side of the couch I was sleeping on. Turned on my phone light and nothing was there. I went back to sleep and woke up hearing something on my desk being moved. I didn't check it out because I was so tired. I just fell back to sleep. Then several hours later, I woke up to my shins being grabbed, pushed down upon. Scared the crap out of me. The weird part was I didn't sense a spirit or entity in the room. My old house was haunted, and I always could feel when the ghost was around. I felt it other times as well, but this time I felt nothing. Just weird. I know. It wasn't sleep paralysis. I've had that at least a dozen times throughout the years. I definitely know it's not that. Sorry, this happened about a month ago, just before my wife and I moved into our new house. I had just gotten off work and picked up my son from the babysitter. We were just about home, driving through the neighborhood, when I glanced over at a tree. For a split second, I swear on everything, I saw a shadow person standing right by the tree. It felt weird, because somehow I could tell it was looking at me. I did a quick double take, but it was gone. What threw me off the most was the fact it was wearing a hat. Now, I've seen a few shadow people in my days, from going to haunted cemeteries or abandoned buildings, but this was different. This one had a hat. It looked like a mix between a top hat and a fedora. I shook it off, drove home, told my wife what I saw, and thought nothing of it. Later that night, though, I saw him in my dreams. I don't remember the rest of the dream, but I do remember coming in through the garage, turning around and seeing him standing there in the middle of the garage, watching me. I froze, fell to the ground, and watched in silent terror as he walked towards me, bent down on one knee, and placed his hand on the center of my back. That's when I was shaken awake by my wife because I was doing the breathing thing again, hyperventilating. For about 3 to 4 days afterwards, I could feel a white, hot, cold spot on my back, right where he touched my back in my dream. Has anyone else ever encountered something like this? The current house my family and I live in is fairly new, maybe built in the late 1800s, but it's been redone, modern and gorgeous. We moved in 3 years ago, but this happened just a year into living there. Me and my brother had already experienced some weird things in the house, but neither of us are paranormal believers or anything, so it was just whatever to both of us. So one night, I'm carrying my toddler sister up the stairs to bring her to the bath. Home alone, just babysitting her. As well, neither me nor my brother had ever brought up the weird orbs of people it looked like we would see behind us in the mirrors or in the corner of our eyes. So, she would not have known. Anyway, turning the corner when my sister points to the dark corner of the hall and says, who's that guy over there? I literally froze because I saw it too and didn't say anything. Right after that is a blur, but I remember telling my sister it was just the darkness. Nobody was there. I still don't buy it. I think it was a trick of the light and such, but it still makes my skin crawl that she saw what I did and was just 3 years old and had no idea that we had already been seeing stuff. A little late to the party, but ever since we have moved to this new house, me and my brother have had a paranormal experience. When we first moved in, we would hear drawers open and shut in the kitchen, and when staying up past our bedtime, we would hear someone walking outside our room. At this point, we were freaked out because no one was at home during those times. My parents worked the night shift, and there was never any sort of robbery that could have taken place. After that, my grandma came over for a few months, and she felt something was off about the house. And one night, she was screaming, asking someone to let go of her while in her sleep. I went to check on her, and it turns out no one was there. The last night is what sort of convinced my brother that there's something in this house, because I was asleep, and I woke up feeling an uneasy feeling that someone was staring at me. Turns out it was a guy which quickly vanished right before my eyes, and I screamed really loud. It may not be much, but it is enough to spook me for now. The weirdest thing of all of this is that stuff happened between 1 and 2:30 a.m., and my mom and grandma have recited to me that when I was a newborn, I used to scream exactly at 2 every night in the hospital because I was haunted by a ghost. And a lot of the family members of mine have been witness to the haunting of me as a newborn. I don't know what's happening to me, but after 21 years, even after moving countries, I feel like that the cycle of me being haunted is getting repeated because I have been waking up at night frequently over the months, having the uneasy feeling at someone being in my room who was unseen. Small thing, but one of the very few in the last few years. I had many ghost experiences as a child, but today something weird happened. I work in a geriatric home, and today at lunch, as I was feeding an old lady with a spoon, she's in a wheelchair after a stroke but isn't completely paralyzed, but really doesn't move much. She also chews very slow. That's why I have to wait after each piece of food I give her to make sure she swallows. As I'm waiting, I look away at the other people and suddenly felt like someone had pushed the empty spoon I was holding. I looked and nothing, not even nothing around that I might have touched it with. I thought maybe my hand just moved a bit lower as I was looking away, but no, it couldn't have been anything, and definitely not her. She was on the other side. I was on her left. Also, right after the feeling, cold air came, and I had goosebumps. So, I think it was a ghost. My wife and I are quarantining at home, as I tested positive for COVID, and we're both sick. We live in rural PA with no neighbors. I have cameras set up around the property. I was up all night with a fever and chills, and she was sleeping in our room. For the 3 to 4 hours, all the cameras around our property kept triggering saying motion detected, but I could not see anything on the camera. Simultaneously, my dog kept running around the house looking at the windows like something was out there. At this point, I grabbed a gun and we went for a walk around the property, thinking someone might have been trying to break in. I found nothing. This morning when my wife got up, she went into full detail about this realistic dream she had with her father in her childhood home. He's been dead for over 10 years now. I went back and viewed the videos, and the one has what appears to be 3 orbs flying past it. Now, it's not bugs because it was 10 Fahrenheit here that night, and I've seen snow on our cameras before. These things move by so fast. If you stop the video, it's the entire length of the screen. I've never had this happen to our camera system before. In the last 3 years we have had it. What's your take on this? My dad moved into a house in the middle of the woods about 2 years ago, and I moved in with him soon after to help him get around and take care of the house and whatnot. Side note, it's an old house on that land that Native Americans heavily inhabited in the south. Honestly, this house was very weird. The first night I spent there, I was woken up by a woman whispering, "Is anyone home?" right next to me, as I was about to fall asleep. My dad didn't believe me when I told him the next day. It's taken a while to get used to living in the deep woods, but something about this property is off. There's been more than a few times where I've actually felt a heavy presence, almost like someone standing right behind me. I have a cat who I rely on to alert me when there's someone approaching my room, and there have been many times where he's alerted me, but nobody was there. Other times, he just stares at the same corner of my room with an expression that tells me he can see something I can't. There's been more times than I can count where I'll be leaving a room and a cabinet will slam, or it sounds like something was moving behind me. It sounds silly, but it's odd enough for me to notice. I've mentioned it to my father, but he didn't think much of it until early this morning when he woke up and went downstairs to find the basement flooded. Somehow, a shower in the basement was turned on and the drain had been clogged. Neither of us used the shower in the basement. He's not fully convinced there's a ghost in the house. I don't know. If you ask me, he's now fully convinced there's a ghost in this house. I don't know. If you ask me, I think it's more than the house. I get that feeling even when I'm out on a hike. I always leave food scraps and leftovers out on the tree line for the animals. And sometimes, coincidentally, find little treasures in the same spot. Almost like I made a trade with something, with Mother Nature. Once I left strawberry cake leftovers out, and the next day found a stone with a pink crystal formation. Another time I found an arrowhead carved out of stone, and just thought I'd share. My room is very small, and my bed is next to a window. I've been waking up randomly at 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. and seeing a grayish, tall, skinny thing standing across from my bed, and it just stares at me. And when I close my eyes and open them, it seems to get closer. And so I close my eyes and try to sleep. My closet also randomly opens, and it looks like there's something sitting in it. My floor randomly creaks at night, and it sounds like someone is pacing back and forth around my bed. And at this point, I am too scared to open my eyes and look. I've had a time where I woke up to my blanket being pulled off, and I just stay still. I don't move because it's an aggressive tugging. I tuck in my blanket right around me, and I sleep alone at night. When I wake up, my blanket is across the room on the floor. I've heard knocking on my window randomly at like 2 a.m. I'm the only one who has a room downstairs. I also have been recently getting sleep paralysis. And for the past 2 months, I've been having these very vivid, gory dreams. I live with my parents who are Christian. No one lived in this house before us. So, I don't know. Really, the house was built in the 90s. Sometimes I hear knocking at my door at like 2 a.m. and everyone else is asleep. And I leave my door unlocked at night. I don't believe in ghosts, but this is really ticking me off. Any suggestions, welcome. Also, by the way, I'm not religious and I'm 14. It was around 2:10 a.m. last night. I just got finished doing an essay for my college class. I went and turned my light off in my room and on my fish tank. It was pitch black in the room, as I like it when I go to sleep. I turned on my music and sleep timer to shut the music off in 50 minutes. That is important to keep track of time in the story. I remember laying down and closing my eyes, facing the wall. I woke up feeling something was strange. Enough time has passed to where the music was turned off. I sat up and grabbed my phone, turning on the flashlight, looking around my room. I woke up and generally felt like someone or something was in my room. I saw nothing, and I turned the flashlight off and put the music and sleep timer on again, laying down and facing the wall again. It was not 5 minutes later when I felt something literally sit on my bed next to me, because I felt my body lean in that direction. It was a strange sense of calmness I felt from it, and when I moved a little, I felt the weight leave. This is almost a month after my dog, who was literally my only friend of 4 years, died. I have been slowly getting used to sleeping alone at night, and this experience really woke me. I felt so safe and comforted by the presence that I was sad when it left. I am an atheist and I do not believe in any higher presence, so this was a very strange experience for me. I just felt like sharing this with people. As a kid, I would see black shadows, silhouettes at night. I used to see them frequently for at least a year. They would walk around the house, around my bed, and they would walk in one direction, and then proceed to walk into the wall, disappearing from what I remember. There used to be female and male silhouette, no children. So I asked if anyone else has ever had this happen to them or heard something similar. I never knew what was going on, and I have never spoke about it as an adult. Would love to hear about any similar experiences or information known on this subject. So pretty much my whole life since I can remember, random stuff always happens. Volume changes, TV turning back on, etc. Now to the main point me and my brother have discussed this many times with our experiences, and we both feel something is attached to our dad, since stuff has happened house to house, no matter where we moved. Number 1, I was home alone sitting on the floor when something sat on my bed and patted my head, and I heard a goodbye and then my name. Number 2, my brother has seen shadows around my parents' room. Number 3, volume changes, TV and electronics being turned back on. 4, my dog constantly staring at a corner of the hallway and growling and barking at things that aren't there. Me and my brother are trying to figure out whether this is like a past relative following around my dad, or whether it's something just there or intending to become violent. Nothing violent has ever happened to my knowledge. Central California, there's an old mining community that you've probably heard of called the Mother Lode. It's an area of California that was a large part of the gold rush. That is where this story takes place. On the way out of town, down a long road, almost like a stretch of highway, you suddenly veer off to the right and go down a rough, older road less than a quarter mile down. The road dead ends into a circle parking area with a gate at the end, which is kept locked by the city. If you were to go past the gate, you will end up at a popular lake in my area. When you park at the end, you are basically surrounded on one side by steep hills dotted with poison oak and tall pine and oak trees. The other side is a steep downhill slope to the lake. So basically, you are in a bowl. We were told if we were to go up to the left of the steep hill, that there would be an old mine, long abandoned by the miners that the county didn't close. About 250 feet up the steep hill, we found the old mine, almost hidden in a slight divot in the hillside that you wouldn't see unless you walked right up on it. To get into the mine, you had to climb down a slight slope into the ground and go over some medium-sized rocks on the ground, leftovers from when they blasted into the mountain. The mine itself was about 7 feet tall and 6 feet wide, which formed a tunnel that was about 250 feet into the mountain. The mine had rough rock walls with a colorful vein running along the left wall. This vein is said to indicate the presence of gold by its ribbons of color. The tunnels followed along that vein, taking at least 2 turns with a couple of short dead-ended offshoots. As you got deeper into the mine, you had to step carefully to avoid mud, which is what the old ore cart tracks were handy for. Ore carts hauled blasted rocks out of the mine on like mini railroad tracks. Once you're inside the mine, it was completely and utterly dark and silent, except for the sounds of the wind howling and dripping water. We took our time walking into the dark tunnel until we eventually reached the tunnel's end, a wall of solid rock. Disappointed, we started on the way back to the entrance. My buddy decided to stop near the entrance to chip some sample rock from the vein in the wall. He promised to be quick, so I just stood and waited for him. I maybe stood there for a couple of minutes before I heard the first strange sound. It sounded like a small pile of rocks toppling over, echoing up the shaft towards us. I tried to tell my buddy what I just heard, but he didn't hear me. So I just let it go. Not even 2 minutes later, I heard it again. That time closer. That time I got his attention to tell him what I just heard. But he just thought I was being paranoid. He said, "You're just hearing an echo from me." I tried to take his word for it, but again, not even 2 minutes later, there it was again. That time the sound came with a feeling of panic and fear. That was when I literally just said, "You only have to be faster than your slowest friend." Then I just took off running, over the rocks and out of the mine. When he came out a few minutes later, he said he walked back to the end and didn't see any fallen rocks. I didn't go back there until a few years later with another buddy of mine. Same as before, up the steep hill we went. The mine looked exactly as it did before, front to back, with no signs of a cave-in, just as my other buddy had done before. My other buddy just had to stop on the way out to chip away at the damn vine, winding along the left wall. As I was standing there waiting, I heard another strange, scary sound, but that time, it sounded like a rattle, and we both heard it. The only way we could describe it was it sounded just like a baby rattle. We both froze and looked at each other, puzzled and anxious, illuminated in each other's headlamps. Not even a couple minutes later, we both heard it again. The sound of a baby rattle. We both grew up here, so we knew it wasn't a rattlesnake or anything, which are common here. When we heard it the third time, the creepy feeling came right back to me, and I just ran out of there as fast as I could, practically tripping on the rocks on the way out. I haven't gone back since. I can't describe it. Something about that old mine just came with a bad, scary feeling, and both people that went there with me felt it as well. Okay, so this isn't an apartment I just moved into. I moved in around July 2020 and had no ghost or paranormal encounters until just starting yesterday. So yesterday around 1 in the morning, I hear sudden movements coming from the master bedroom of the house, which is at the complete opposite side of my kitchen. It wasn't really loud, but loud enough to hear it. It sounded like some kind of bags being touched. I first ignored it and went back to my room. At 5 a.m., I leave my room to go to the restroom until I hear the same bag noise again, but this time very loud. Everyone was asleep and my parents were already at work since 3 a.m. I get nervous and quickly go back to my room. Then this afternoon when I woke up, I heard some kind of door opening, which then I found out was my bathroom door right next to my bedroom. Am I being haunted by a ghost right now? And why all of a sudden now? Clarification. There are no intruders or any person living in my apartment. There isn't really a place to hide for the squatters anyways. Maybe the storage room, but it's full of crap with a zero space. And also I already checked and no one was in there. I had been asking to see a spirit for weeks, and one night I looked to my left and saw a pitch black figure with sharp teeth and white glowing circular eyes and small black pupils staring at me. I knew it was real. I stopped smiling after a while. Then in a blink, it disappeared. I saw it a few times actually. One time I was in the game room, which is an open space, but has all the halls, and in the corner of my eye is my old room. I saw the same figure, which is about 2 feet tall, run past my couch, and I also saw 2 figure human-like shadows in front of my old bedroom where I saw that creature. I also sometimes, when in my room, it's pitch black. Around where my feet are, I feel something sit on my bed and from the corner of my room watching me. Another time, I had a dream about the same room I saw that creature in, of an invisible figure throwing things around and making noises. I used to also have a doll, and I would have dreams about her being evil and watching me, so I got rid of it. If you can share your thoughts as to what type of creatures these may be, and why they don't leave me alone, please let me know. Well, hello there, people. I just got up from a nap. Why? Because as I was drifting in and out of consciousness, having the usual inner monologue on remembering something off, I was half asleep, and I can't quite remember, when I hear, to my left ear, a noisy laugh going, hee hee hee, somewhat monotone, as in a laugh that is not laughing. As I was hearing that half asleep, this thing actually shocked me. Yes, I woke up in a panic as a jolt of electricity struck me. My heart beating, everything hurting, and I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis, or something, while this thing keeps making that noise. I was afraid. Then I remembered not to fear, and then I tried to look at the thing. Now I was getting angry like a person who had just had fallen to a bad prank. P.S. I was alone in my room with the door closed. These kinds of things have been happening a while, and it takes many manners of supernatural, such as ghost, entities in my dreams, etc. But I think whatever it is actually making fun of me, and well, this time I was listening earlier to X in Spanish, and specifically one of the stories, a thing that got repeated was a phrase. It was a laugh. It wasn't a laugh. Several times as the author was trying to cope with retelling the traumatic experience within a cabin in the woods. This thing heard the story with me and just played a laugh that I can tell was not a laugh. What do you think this thing is, people? I can try to recall more of these pranks, but I personally do not think I'd get any response. But I wanted to share when it was still fresh and it still hurts a bit. Second thing happened on Christmas. I decided to stay at home with my pupper, and something manifested onto a particular room of the house. I thought we had an intruder since this room does lead outside, and the door opened itself by the time the fireworks began. I held the door while the dog stayed nearby. Eventually I overcame that feeling of dread and opened the door to find the room empty.
This experience took place from 2003 to 2007, and because I was born in 1998, you should be able to understand that I'll do my best to give you a full in-depth recollection of the ghost. The only people I will mention that should appear in the story are my mother and my brother, who in the beginning is not yet born. He was born in 2004, so initially it was only my mother and I. A long time ago in my hometown, my mother and I moved into a duplex, where the landlord lived upstairs while we lived downstairs. This house, as I remember, it was older, but must have been remodeled, because it looked very 2000s, and not from the late 19th century. We had a front porch and a decent-sized backyard with a fireplace in the center of it, about as big as a yard as you can get in urban, in the middle of our street home. Now for the layout of this duplex. I wasn't there when the moving in furniture took place. I actually hung out with my aunt and my guardian. But the moment I stepped into our new home, I was excited. Excited to get on my CTR TV, in all honesty. But anyways, when you first walk into the house, you'll find that our dining room table is directly to the right of the front door. Looking forward was the living room. The CTR TV sat on the floor like those models usually could. The couch to the left wall, farther back from the front door to the other side of the duplex, was the slide door to the backyard, and to the left of that door, the computer and desk against the left wall. Behind the couch was like some kind of counter. The wall was cut out to give a view of the kitchen. To the right of that, the actual entrance to the kitchen. The kitchen was how you got into the two-bedroom closet and bedroom. In fact, all those rooms were connected. My bedroom and my mom's bedroom had no doors, so we could always see what each other were doing. I had the closet that had the door to the bathroom having a closest door and a kitchen door. I do remember how everything was laid out, but let me not bore you too hard. 2003. Finally to the thing you're waiting for. The second thing I did after settling down into my new home was look out to the sliding door to the backyard. Almost instinctively, this experience introduces you to her. I don't have a name for her. She, the spirit, never said her name, nor do I remember what the history of the duplex said online. I thought nothing of the girl I saw staring down at the fireplace, and I remembered what she was wearing and looked like to this day. I don't remember her face, only her scar. That I'll reveal to you soon. She didn't turn around, so at this time I've never actually seen her face, as she stared down at the fireplace unmoving, the sun reflecting off her gorgeous golden blonde hair, and she was wearing some kind of white dress. To be honest, that feels like a common thing for female spirits and dresses, doesn't it? The dress was gently being brushed by the wind, and it was the afternoon. The sun was high in the sky at this time, and yet there she was. Little did 5 or 6-year-old me realize that she wasn't actually alive or there. Little did I realize, but soon learn, she was more than what she seemed. I think I asked my mother who she was. My mom would always ask me who I was talking about. She couldn't see her, yet I could. Every day she would be there by the fireplace in the same position, all morning staring at this fireplace. I never thought of approaching her for some reason, but I have been in the backyard plenty of times. But whenever I did go back there, she wasn't there. This next bit, I'm not sure if it was before my brother was born or after, but because I actually have no memory of my brother during this moment, it had to have been before. One day I was sitting at home by myself in the living room. It was the weekend, and my mom was working, so I decided to make a bowl of cereal, and almost turned to the TV when suddenly out of nowhere, my soul is startled by the sound of a very, very loud robot voice that spoke an entire sentence. My thoughts were everywhere, scrambling to try to understand what I'd heard. Our landlord was quiet, pretty much never home, so I knew it couldn't have been from upstairs. I merely remember that this great and powerful voice was all around me. Maybe it was in my head. I'm actually not sure. But she randomly entered into my thoughts. I somehow felt that her and that one timber voice were connected. I would never hear that deep electronic voice ever again. 2004 is when things started to become increasingly real. 2004, this is the year my brother was born in October, so I have a few things I can recollect that I know for sure happened in this year. I feel that the activity increased throughout the years, but by the time we moved out, she could do anything and has done a lot. 2004, what a year of nostalgia for me. I was as much of a gamer then as I am now at 23 years old. Although back then I would actually watch TV. My favorite show was, funny enough, Ghost Hunters. Today I don't really like or think that the show is real, but back then I did. And she, my friendly ghost with no name, would put fuel into that fire. There was this one day, sun out and all, where my mom was sitting in the living room. I could in fact see her head over the counter. I pulled out my back then childhood board game, Sorry, and said out loud, setting up in the middle of the kitchen floor, "Who wants to play a board game with me?" I'm not sure why I used who, rather than do you, when the only person there was my mother. She was talking about her seeing a job with someone on their phone, so she wasn't listening to me. However, a voice of a young girl said something to the left side of me. To the left of me was a refrigerator, and to the front of the refrigerator was the entrance to my mom's bedroom. The voice said in a playful voice, "I do." I was fascinated and not frightened at the same time for some reason. To hear a voice coming from nowhere and pushing it off as a normal thing, might I add. "Okay," I said. "You go first." I pulled the card out for the voice, and I watched and I waited. The card was an 8, and I gave the spirit the green pieces while I was read. Of course, much to my disappointment, the green pieces didn't move at all. They had to be moved by me. And I ended up playing an entire game of Sorry by myself. Feeling a very cold air around me again, I thought absolutely nothing of it. My mom eventually got up from the couch and went to the fridge to get something from it. That's when the cold air dissipated. I don't remember if my mom and I were conversed, but eventually that night, things would change forever in that apartment. Night came and I was sleeping soundly well into my dream world. I could say that this memory was actually very foggy, so I'm going to do my best to make sense of the conclusion of it. My dream was very abnormal. Everything around me was fogged like the old Silent Hill video games, hiding the surroundings in a creepy, emoted void. I was in my bed in my dream, and she, the blonde girl, was sitting in that gray void next to the bed. Her face was blurry as hell, but I knew something was wrong with it. Her hair was parted, and I don't actually think she had eyes. She was pale and looked like she sat in a fire. Her skin was covered in burns, and she was sitting on her legs with a very friendly smile across her lips. "Hi, would you like me to read you a story?" she asked me, and then immediately began reading to me something from Mother Goose. She never gave me a chance to respond to her question. The entire dream went on like this. Her voice faded out slowly before I knew it, and I would be awakened again by the following morning. Apparently I was sleeping. I got up out of bed and asked my mother about her. I described the girl to my mom and everything, yet I remember none of that. I was sleepwalking, both dreaming of the girl reading a book to me while my body got up to tell my mother about the ghost. My mother brought it up to me eventually, and for some reason I was confused as to what she was talking about. It was almost as if I completely forgot about the ghost girl. The next incident is a representative nuisance. Anytime my mom and I would return home, the living room TV remote would be laying face down on the carpet center of the room, and the back cover missing, and the AA batteries hidden in two places. We'd have to find them every single time. I wonder what my mother thought of all this. I can only tell you in depth my brother and myself. I think my mom must have been trying to sense the remote situations. Maybe she blamed it on me. Maybe she had incidences that I don't know about, and didn't want to scare me. The remote game, as I called it, carried on for months. It would finally stop once my brother was born. This is when things got real. I would have urges of jealousy or eagerness. I'd bring a butter knife in my hand to try to suffocate my brother. And I loved the kid so much I can't explain why I would make such a violent attempt. I would stop myself before I did anything. I don't actually remember grabbing the knife ever, in fact. My brother was never harmed, but the spirit girl had plans for him. For a while, the house was quiet. Time passes, and I don't recall any more instances of 2004 to 2005. I can basically sort out these memories through the video games I played. This year was when Star Wars Battlefront 2 released. I thought I was playing quite a lot of Star Wars Bounty Hunter and Destroy All Humans. My brother, who I will for the sake of naming him, is called Austin. He was becoming talkative, still in the crib at this time of the next incident. This incident consisted of a second dream that signaled the return of her. She was not absent since the last incident I described. This time she was going to be moving things and people while you were there. To see it in your peripherals. She would talk a lot more, but I could no longer see her in 2005. In fact, she ditched me for my brother to become his imaginary friend. The first incident of 2005, she appeared in my dreams and read me The Itsy Bitsy Spider, but my brother was there next to me. My bed was outside of the backyard, and she was sitting in the middle of the fireplace reading to both of us. The second incident, her powers. I was sitting in my bed, pitch black, in my mom's room, which I'm able to see from my bed and my brother's crib around the corner, just over the other side of the wall in my bed. I'm sitting there trying to sleep when all of a sudden I hear footsteps from the kitchen to my brother's crib. I watch, fixing my eyes and adjusting them to the dark. There was absolutely no one there. Then I heard something dragging and a thud. Out came my already walking brother, who had no way of getting out of the crib. It was too high for him to do so. He walked up to me, not creeped out at all, compared to me, speaking gibberish, and I went to tell my mom that Austin got out of his crib somehow. She told me to get back in bed and she'll take care of him. Creeped out, I remained in bed and stared at my ceiling for a while. I made friends with my next door neighbor in 2005. His name was Isaiah, but he never really experienced any of these instances with me. If he has, I don't know about it. I only mention him to bring up that his house sitting is to the right of my home. I was social for a time and being quite the daredevil. At night was when the spirit would do things in front of me. One in particular was my brother and that little jumper thing, babysitting to walk around. Note that somehow he had walked to my side of the bed at night. Yet he can't really walk like that. He was bouncing around and beating up all the spinning circles, pressing buttons and dancing to the audio music. When suddenly, I noticed he gets real quiet. I was playing Pac-Man World 2 in my mom's bedroom when he was in the kitchen. So right outside the doorway, he was staring at about my height, but nowhere in my direction. He was looking to the small open space to the left of the refrigerator and talking. Austin was laughing and talking gibberish to someone that he thought was there. Mom noticed this too, and we're like, Austin? Who are you talking to? He would do this for a while. He actually got out of his crib one more time eventually this year, but I'm not sure when it was. But I do remember carrying him and barely being able to lift him over the side of the crib and back into it. I have one more thing from 2005, and honestly, I think this is the coolest incident I have with the spirit. It was the nighttime and I was playing Star Wars Bounty Hunter, and my mom's bed had a little lamp on the left side of it. Out of my peripherals, I saw the corner of her bed blanket lift up in the air and drop back down. When I attempted to directly look at what was in the blaze of what was going on, again, I was thrilled rather than chilled. If it were to guess what was the ghost girl doing, she was probably laying on my mom's bed to watch my brother in his crib. At this point, I no longer hear or see her, so I can only guess that where she's standing is based off my peripheral sightings, and what my brother was up to. My brother was sleeping when this happened. 2006. There's not much more that I can remember of this year, but I could ask my brother if his experiences eventually. I remember at least two things. One of them was how I was having emotions that were not my own. I'd be struck in trances. There is no known order of events for this year. The closet that connects my bedroom to the bedroom was a point of interest this year for me. Something always told me that whenever my nose bled, or if I bled anywhere at all, to wipe it all over the walls of the closet. At night, I felt like someone was watching me from the keyhole. One day, I suddenly felt so depressed and aimless that I took a stool and started to oven the clock for 5 hours straight. Neither Mom or Austin was home, so I was left there uninterrupted. My thoughts were creepy. I was remembering a fire, yet I've never experienced a fire as big as I was imagining. 2007. Austin is talking great by now. I begin hearing laughter and footsteps in my mom's bedroom, and Austin would sleep in the same bed as Mom. The crib was removed at this point, and the TV in the bedroom area was moved at least 3 times. That TV was new at this time, yet there was a day where I began playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 2003. The TV was sitting on the floor next to Mom's bed, and I sat right next in front of it. The TV turned itself off. I heard the button click and everything, so I turned the TV back on. I continued to play the game, and the TV does the same thing. It turns off, and the sound of the button of the TV being pressed can be heard. I sat there and I grumbled. I turned the TV on again, and I sat there and I watched the power button of the TV, waiting for it to turn off again. Sure thing. I see the button being pushed into the TV, and the loud sound click of the old CRT TV buttons had, and the static of the TV screen dissolving. I've never left a bedroom so fast. The TV remote throughout this year would be thrown around, and I was able to see the ghost girl again. Austin and I both saw her staring at the backyard fireplace. One night we had people over and had a bonfire, and I remember seeing the spirit hovering in a tree branch above us, staring at the fire. Do you remember when I said that she looked like she was burned alive in that dream a few years back? Her dress was now dirty, and her face was not blurry anymore. I could just make out a facial feature. Eventually my mom would look up the history of the apartment. At some point in the 1900s, the duplex was set on fire, and this girl my brother and I always saw was caught in the middle of it. She passed away in either the bedrooms or living room. My friend next door and I started to not get along, and before any of these got worse, Mom and my brother and I moved out. The day came when we'd see that house for one last time. Mom pulled out the driveway, and us and I were in the back seat. On our porch, I saw her again. She had her hand on the railing, watching us drive off. I asked my mom, "Is she coming with us?" My mom, scared by my question, responded with, "Hell no, she isn't," and sped away. 2 years later, my friend's house would mysteriously be set on fire from the side of their house facing our duplex. My friend's house was completely destroyed. I believe the duplex is still there to this day. In fact, I'm going to Google Maps it in a minute. To experience such a paranormal activity made me believe that life has to have a lot more secrets that many the eye can't meet nor the mind able to explain. We know very little about our world, and spirits like this girl are the many reasons why you should keep your mind open. Hope you enjoyed reading this. Update. I discovered a few things yesterday searching for this house. I found it by looking in the general neighborhood. I knew that a liquor store was somewhere nearby. Turns out that a few years ago the entire street was torn down for a factory to have space. However, Google Maps Street View still shows the duplex, and the rebuilt house next to it. The satellite view of the duplex is outdated because the house next to it still has a big plain area, where the house once was. In reality, nothing is on that street anymore. It's a shame. I asked my brother if he remembered anything. Understandably, I have to remember that this is how he spent his first 3 years of his life, and he said he kind of remembers something, but not really at all. I then asked my mother about the girl and how the house next to it caught on fire. She told me that the girl actually drowned. I remember looking like she was burnt to death. What if she was covered in soil? Time fogs details. Please excuse my poor grammar, as English is my first language. So when my family built this house in the early 70s, it was all perfect. But then my great-granddad died. Nothing much happened. When I was a kid, I had a small room that always felt watched while I was in there. One night, I even felt something sitting on the bed. I was too scared to look at this person, so I just stared at my wall until I fell asleep again. This was when I was 5 or 6. After I moved into another room, nothing similar ever happened in that room. And then, but recently, things started to happen. Objects started to disappear, and I would find them in various places. I would see shadow people and figures. A few weeks ago, my mom and I had a strange and chilling experience. She came home from work and was on the first floor. I was on the second floor and heard yelling, "I'm home!" When I went in to go open the door in the staircase, I heard a feminine scream. As if someone would be in pain. I ran downstairs because I thought my mom was hurt. But when I saw her and she said, "You didn't just scream, did you?" I shook my head in fear. She told me she heard it from upstairs, but I heard it from downstairs. A few days later, I talked to my sister about paranormal stuff happening in our house. Turns out, we both hear the steps that sometimes are in the attic. We thought it might be a raccoon at first, but then we listened to it again. It was masculine steps. It sounded like military boots. Since we talked about it as a family, it got worse. I woke up a few days ago with the feeling of someone choking me. I always dreamt about death every night. I feel watched every step I take. I honestly don't know what to do anymore. We already had a priest come here. We staged the whole house correctly. I'm thinking about just moving out with my sister and my mom.
Hi everybody, it's Curious Raven. As I'm sitting here in my bedroom recording these for you lovely, lovely people, I keep hearing things. I know I've talked to other narrators who also hear things in their mics, something kind of like a bump in the night. But it's broad daylight outside, it's not even 12 p.m. and I swear it sounds like someone is walking in the living room right now. But I know no one's there, it's only me home right now. But I just wanted to tell y'all that me personally, I get a lot of stuff in my mic that kind of creeps me out. I'll hear little knocks and creaks and falls and just creepy. Thank you so much for my really good friend and narrator, Jensen. Y'all should go and subscribe to his channel. He is amazing. Jensen helped me out a whole bunch when I first started, and I cannot thank him more than enough. So thank you, Jensen. I love y'all very much. And remember, it's scary out there. So, I have been getting bothered by ghosts ever since I went to my ex's house, then my boyfriend's house to spend the night. I've been getting bothered ever since. I've tried saging and salting. I've tried prayer, and now the new way they bother me is tapping. They tap on my headphones while I'm playing games and talking to my friends. I have had them tap on my teeth before while I'm dead asleep, then I wake up. If I lay my hands down on my pillow, they tap on my fingernails, clearly ignoring it isn't working. I've asked them on a ghost app what they want. They said they want a picture of Michaela. I don't know who Michaela is. I wouldn't even know where to start to look for them. I tried explaining that I can't help them, and they need to leave. But they are still tapping me. What should I do? So, I used to date someone who I suspected was a narcissistic sociopath. My personal theory is that narcs are more susceptible to attracting demons. With that said, I ended our friendship a few months ago, but recently rekindled it out of curiosity to see if I was right about my suspicions with him. When we used to date, odd things were happening in my home. Electrical appliances like my lamp, space heater, and fan would turn off by themselves at random times. When we stopped dating and had no contact with him, All said things ceased. Now that I've started talking to him again, I've noticed things started up again. Not only that, but a certain few times I feel as if there's someone other type of being in the room. It brings me fear at times. Yesterday I decided to say out loud, "Approach." The feeling got stronger. I then said, "Are you good or evil?" And I instantly got goosebumps, and my fear skyrocketed. I could feel it in my gut. I then said, "Please leave," and the feeling was gone, as well as a feeling that something else was there. That's until the night came, and the presence was back. I'm convinced that maybe this person may have either been demon-possessed, sold their soul, or worshipped Satan. He used to say he needed an exorcist, and now he's going to hell. I'm not a religious person, but I do believe in the spirit realm. I'm planning to no longer have any more contact with this person. But what do I do with this being that keeps bothering me? I'm convinced it's a demon, just looking for help and advice. It's making me uncomfortable to sleep at night. I have a battery-powered candle by my TV in the bedroom. It's on a timer to come on at around 8 p.m. and stay on for 8 hours. I have had it for about 3 months, and I've never seen it turn off once. It turns on as you imagine. I'm typically sleeping during the hour. Last night around midnight, I was at the end scene of a movie, Crimson Peak, where it ties back to the initial scene. If you've seen it, the actress says, "Ghosts are real, this much I know." And directly after she says ghosts are real, the battery-powered candle turned off. Me and my husband were like, "Whoa, that was weird. Time for the batteries to die." I came into my bedroom tonight to go back to bed and looked at the candle. Sure as shit, it's back on, and it's definitely not irregularly bright. The batteries definitely didn't die. If it's any more coincidence, today the 7th is the 22nd anniversary of my grandpa's death, who died young from cancer when I was 4 and my dad was 24. A medium gave me a great reading and told me that my grandpa is always around my dad, the baby of the family. Not sure how else to explain the candle turning off, but definitely piqued my interest. There are only a few other blatant things that have happened to me that I would consider an experience, and they have all involved lights. I didn't know where to post this. So sorry this isn't a ghost story, but it made me really question the mind-body conundrum. I had sleep paralysis on and off for the past 25 years. I'm used to it. During some of these experiences, I have seen the Hat Man. I have seen and heard a black, snarling demon dog. I've heard whispering in a language that doesn't seem like it even exists, that was neither male nor female. Just really bizarre things. But today, I was really tired and insisted that I close my eyes on the couch while my 3-year-old hung out next to me and watched TV. It was a late night last night and I was just tired. So she did, and she was fine. I went into a sleep paralysis episode and started to call for my daughter, who was sitting at my feet while I was laying there. I was looking at her, eyes open, but I couldn't move. I wanted her to jump on me or something so I'd wake up. So I said her name, and she didn't respond. I said it louder, and she still didn't respond. She just sat there, face forward watching TV. And so I yelled her name. Nothing. And then it dawned on me. She could not hear me at all. I got that typical panic feeling you get, but this time I was actually trapped. It wasn't like I was mentally imagining myself saying, yelling her name. I actually was, with a huge amount of effort. All day since I have been thinking about this, it was disembodied spirits go through when they are trying to get our attention, because it truly felt like I was me. But I was just consciousness, a little bit trapped inside of a body that happened to be useless at the time, but still just consciousness, like I was pushing to get out of this physical thing that was holding me back. It was the strangest thing, and something that it really made me realize there is a you that's not your body. Thanks for reading. My grandmother was born in 1945, and her grandparents gave her a house in the 60s for $1. They were born in late 1800s because my great-grandmother was born in 1919. This house has been in our family for generations, and a lot of family members that are no longer with us grew up in that house. I remember staying up sobbing, mourning my sister. It was late, probably around 3 a.m. My sister had severe cerebral palsy, and I remember her hand touched the back of my head. She used to rub my head when I bent down to her wheelchair to give her a hug. She was wheelchair bound her whole life. I knew it was my sister's hand, although since I've gotten older, I can't even sleep in my grandmother's house without feeling like a group of people are staring at me. My older sister and nephew have confirmed this. My grandmother has said she has heard things moving at night and creaking. That house is very old, 100 plus years, at least. I had a less than 1-year-old fluffy orange kitten who I grew extremely attached to. While he was alive, he was battling with an unknown illness. The ER vet thinks it may have been FIP. He died, and I was heartbroken. My dad helped me bury him in my backyard, and I ordered a little granite headstone for him that had his picture etched into it. My aunt lives with me, and when I showed her the headstone I ordered, we were standing in the kitchen, and all of a sudden we both heard a meow. It wasn't my other cat, because he was asleep in another room, and the meow came from the kitchen. My aunt and I both were sure of that. It freaked both of us out a little, that we suddenly heard a meow from somewhere as I was showing her the headstone. My hope is that it was my kitten's spirit sensing that the headstone was for him and meowing in approval. I posted about the dog before, but I will give a brief recap. In the mornings, I take my aunt's dog out to the yard to do her morning business. I live in a rural area, and it is still dark when I take her out. I turn on the front porch light, and that lights up half of the yard, and I have a flashlight. But there have been several times at the end of the driveway, just as the edge of where the porch light reaches, I see a black dog. My aunt's dog does not react to this dog in any way. Doesn't bark at it, which is odd because she barks at everything. Does not look at it or go near it. In fact, she does not even go to that area of the yard or driveway. Even though the dog is in the dark part of the yard driveway, I can make it out pretty clear. But when I shine the flashlight on it, the dog is not there. The dog is always in the same spot, but it is not there every day. Most of the time, about 2 or 3 times a week. This has been going on for 3 months. My aunt has taken her dog out in the mornings when she is up around the same time, but she has never seen or noticed this dog or anything outside odd. I have tried to wait until it's light out to take my aunt's dog out, but that doesn't work every day. Now I'm having bad dreams, really intense bad dreams, and this has happened 4 nights out of 5. I do not know if they are connected. The dreams are hard to describe, as I can't remember them clearly, but I wake up scared and have no desire to go back to sleep. Do you all think the two are connected? Is there anything I can do? Has anyone had anything like this happen before? I don't know if it was an OBE, me levitating, or an extremely lucid dream, but here it goes. I am 21 years old, 6 feet 4 inches, and around 200 pounds. For the last few weeks, I was with my parents in St. Petersburg, Florida, on vacation. We stayed at an Airbnb located, disclosed location. The 3 of us were alone in the house with our dog for 2 to 3 weeks before more people would arrive. It was around the end of the 2nd week, where I woke up early in the morning to use the bathroom. It was between 1 to 3 a.m. After finishing my business, I returned to bed and lay on my back and just closed my eyes. I don't know if it was in the beginning levels of sleep where I was aware of things around me but can't wake at a moment's notice, or I was sitting there with my eyes closed. In any case, it did not feel as though a lot of time passed, when suddenly I felt myself be lifted out of the bed. Not a straight levitation, but like if I was attached to a board with my arms out straight and a winch lifted by my head, increasing the angle of elevation of my head while sliding the rest of me across the bed until I was at 90 degrees. I then began to rise straight upwards until I made contact with the ceiling, which felt higher than expected. I was then returned into bed, like someone hit rewind on a tape, the reverse of what transpired to lift me out. When that happened, I lay there and think, what just happened? I think I actually said those words out loud at one point, and set up to check my watch or phone for the time, though the detail is a little fuzzy when I try to remember. I do remember opening my eyes, looking around, and closing them. Then the same thing happened. I was at the same level of sleep consciousness. Not a lot of time seemed to pass, but then I was raised out of bed the same way until I reached the ceiling. Then I once again was returned into bed, in reverse of how I was lifted. At that point I sat up and said, "This is weird, what is going on?" Or some variation of that. And I checked the time and it was around 3 to 3:13 a.m., if memory serves. I did try to experience this again, but I drifted off into deep sleep and woke up later in the morning with now further things to report. Upon telling my mother, she was worried, but I told her I was fine. I was more intrigued than fearful. My girlfriend came down to Florida the following Monday, and I told her about it. She thinks I either had a near-death experience in my sleep, or that the spirit of her late grandfather was playing tricks on me. Side note, this is a Airbnb. It has no affiliations with her or her family, and according to her, something similar happened to her brother a few days after his passing. I only met him a handful of times before he passed, so I don't know if that's really a sound theory. I entertain the idea of alien abduction or something, or that the room itself was haunted. Funny thing, the only other strange thing that occurred was that a wall mirror fell off the wall when no one was in there after my girlfriend came down. Also, the bedroom door closing by itself, which occurred several times before she came down when I left it slightly ajar a few times. Whatever really transpired, I did not feel the ceiling. It was almost like whatever it was trying to pull me straight out, and whatever I was, my spirit, was getting held back by the ceiling. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I live in the Royal Mojave Desert, alone in a trailer. I woke up at 2:15 a.m. in sleep paralysis, and I was being observed by what I believe were aliens that were just out of sight. It made me super uncomfortable, and I fought with all my might to break out of sleep paralysis. As I was coming out of it, I heard these clear words echoing in the astral realm that faded as I made it back to this side. My turn. So I'm sitting up now, and I'm feeling that familiar goosebumps, clammy skin, uncomfortable feeling when something unwelcome is in the presence around this time. Then 10 to 15 minutes later, I heard a very distinct but quiet knocks at the door. I heard stories that if you hear 3 knocks at night, you should never answer it. What entity could this have been? Before any event happened, I never believed in the paranormal and never experienced this. For a while, I moved back to my parents' house because I recently became disabled. The past couple of months, I started to notice a dark, vague figure that just stands there, and I assume it is looking at me. This figure has no face, and it has been doing something to my dreams. I keep dreaming of me looking at a window, looking at the earth, and I get really tense up emotionally for no reason every night. The figure has been trying to show me what it looks like. I see bits and pieces of who they are truly. Honestly, I don't know if I'm just seeing things, but I can see it during the day and night watching me. By the way, I have no history of mental illness and had a pretty normal life. A couple years ago, I had a nightmare about an old woman. Nightmares aren't unusual for me, but this was so terrifying I can't even begin to describe it. In my nightmare, the lady was following me everywhere, trying to kill me. When I woke up, I was crying and covered in sweat. I swear I saw her in the corner of my room, but I assumed it was an after effect of the nightmare. Now I'm not so sure. I feel like I couldn't move, and I couldn't cry out. I've never had anything like sleep paralysis before or since. I started feeling like I was suffocating, and I couldn't breathe. All I remember after that was I had a seizure, and afterwards I just fell asleep crying. The more I've thought about it afterwards, the more it sounded like this might be a paranormal experience. Was that lady trying to kill me? And if she was, why? I still remember her face, but don't recognize her from anywhere other than the nightmare. This is not my first experience with paranormal, but was definitely the most confusing and terrifying. I was on a date with a guy, and we took a drive down in this small district with all of these abandoned buildings. I'm not at all sure what the history behind it is. At the end of the road, which was maybe 5 to 10 miles long, there's a house. It's a big house, fenced off and completely abandoned. It was eerie, but still fun sight to see, like everything else in that area. According to the guy I was out with, the house was owned by a family who were murdered by one of the servants, all in the same night. I don't really believe that, but I also didn't search it much. According to him, you can still hear the screams of the family some nights. He said sometimes you can smell smoke and hear an eerie woman's laughter from around the house. Not entirely sure about all of that. He wanted to go in, but it's still considered private property, so I told him that I wasn't comfortable with it. After goofing off for a few minutes outside the fence, he took me home. Well, since then, I've been having the exact same dream every night. In the dream, it's like I'm walking, but I can't really see my body. I find myself standing in front of the house, where I walk to the door and twist the knob 3 times. Then I hit the door frame with the palm of my hand. After that, I go to the side window, where I hear a voice saying, "Go help Katie." That's when I wake up. I now have usually a hard time getting to sleep. I've been having to put the TV on after waking up. Can someone please give me a little bit of insight? I'm a little scared. I've never had a bad dream like this. Can it just be logical or some sort of sleep paralysis? Please be nice. I don't know anything about this stuff. Last night I was on my phone texting my girlfriend, and out of the corner of my eye I saw a random bright flash of light. My door to my room is to my left, and I always leave it open. And when I look down from my bed, I always see my door first. It was pitch dark. Ever since I have been living here, the lights from cars always come through the curtains, but you can barely see them since I'm on the 2nd floor. The flash of light looked exactly like this. It was a bit more white, though. Appeared for a quarter of a second. It was bright, and the light almost took up the entire hallway, but it appeared and disappeared so quickly that my eyes didn't have time to start squinting. I have had one other paranormal thing happen to me before here in this house, and it was more like an attack. So I live in an old house, probably 80-year-old house, pretty old regardless. Every night around 2 a.m., like clockwork, I smell cigarette smoke in my toilet. I have 2 other roommates, none who smoke. I've lived here for a year and a half now. No problems other than when I go pee in the middle of the night, and then there's that smoke smell. Should I just ignore it since it hasn't posed any problems for me? I really don't want to confront it since it doesn't affect me and stays within the bathroom. Okay, so I think it was in early January 2021. Me and my friend were like hanging out since we were neighbors, and we found out that the 3rd apartment was open. We thought maybe the caretaker left it open, since no one lives there anymore. We decided to come inside out of curiosity. She and I made the apartment our hangout place, since the caretaker has not come back. One night, me and my friend decided to come inside to talk. We were scaring each other with some stories that we know, and then I dared her to go up the stairs. She was kinda against it, but she still went. As she was climbing, I focused my eyes on her, since I was kind of afraid that something might happen. She then stopped and said she didn't want to continue, and of course I didn't want to force her. So I said sure, and after a second or two, I saw someone right in front of her, a girl who looked just like my friend staring at me, as if she was mad at me. She was wearing a night dress with sleeves to her wrist and the dress covering her knee. At the very end of it was some blood, and then the girl disappeared. I talked to my friend about this, and she believed me since paranormal stuff happens to people. It has almost been a year and I still couldn't forget about the girl. So we decided to ask help from others in Reddit. So if you have any theories about this, please comment right away since we can't get it off our minds. Thank you so much. Please do believe that everything I said was not a lie. It really happened. When I was younger, I was staying on a farm with my family. There was the farm owner's house, our house, and another man who bred horses staying out the back of the property. One night there was a piercingly loud scream very late at night. It was obviously a bird, but it sounded so much like a young woman screaming. You could easily mistake it for a horror movie scream. I'd never heard a bird like that before or after, even though I'd lived in the area for years. A Google search said, "It is nicknamed the Screaming Woman Bird." I thought the bird might have been hurt or stuck, so I wanted to go out and see if I could help. My mother insisted I do not go because of the horses and it being so late. The bird only screamed a few more times, then went quiet, and I forgot about it. 2 days later, there were police cars outside our house. They said that 2 days earlier, the horse breeder had been kicked in the chest by one of his horses and was found dead by the owner of the property. That horse was quite aggressive. It would run up and down along the fence all day, turning the grass to dirt while watching the mares. The next day, it was taken away to put him down. It was as though the bird came from somewhere else to tell us something was wrong. How would it even know this had occurred from a distant place? The police said that he would have died instantly, but who knows? Maybe if I had gone out that night, I could have saved him. The bird is supposedly an aboriginal and is considered a devil bird that foretold someone's death. Hey everyone, new guy here. I was wondering if anyone happened to know what it means to have a strong cigarette smell in particular rooms of my house. Specifically only mine so far, but my folks have smelled the same thing despite quitting years ago. I'll smell it at night after everyone's gone to bed, but it's not unheard of to smell it during the day as well. At the time of typing this at 11:30 p.m., I smell it pretty heavenly. It's weird though, because when I take a deep breath expecting to smell the odor even heavier, I get nothing. I also feel like I only smell it when I start feeling really sad in the night. Not sure if the two things are connected or not either. Any advice would be cool. Maybe it's nothing, but I just find it funny that the fixtures have come loose lately across the house, as well as plates falling over for no reason. Thanks in advance. When I was young, 7 or 9-ish, we lived in a large house built in early 1900s or late 1890s for around 2 years. It was rented from an estate in generally acceptable condition on the inside. I will always remember the house was split in two distinct parts, not by walls or anything physical, but by the way it felt. The house had a staircase that arose in the middle of the property. We, family, lived on the left side. The right side and its rooms were empty, apart from the occasional nanny or cook. The essentially uninhabited part, apart from the nanny, I will never forget, as it truly felt sinister. I remember often seeing shadows move in the corner of my eye, in the main dining room and its adjacent butler's pantry. My brother and I would place bets on who would have the balls to run to the end of the corridor and back, or indeed enter one of the rooms, which were painted in a hideous blue. The children refused to go upstairs alone. I think now, as a grown man, I would still be reluctant to. I will never forget how shocked I was to learn that my brother was bathing alone upstairs after distinctively intense stick battle in the woods. He is a known author and was inspired to put this online after I stumbled across a draft on his desk that described the corridor, and in his experiences of the house, which obviously is far superior to my description and strangely similar to it, given that we have not discussed this topic for over 40 years. One always felt as if someone was watching or present. I am sure people are able to relate to this. To this day, I didn't experience that again. Our family nanny, who was essentially our mother at the time, was from the Philippines and always said that she was never alone in the part of the house, and that frequently important possessions of her would be moved from her room to the opposite end of the house. We had one chef from Brazil who wouldn't sleep there at night, and one who stayed with us. The previous occupiers had organized 2 separate visits from the local Catholic church to perform exorcisms on the property, and one of the gardeners had committed suicide by throwing himself into the lake and drowning after attaching stones to himself in 1912. One of the most unsettling things about the house was the silence. You almost hear and feel it. The house is situated in a rural area, but expensive property market, which has a large demand for period manor houses. However, it seems strange that people only seem to rent the place for more than a year or two, and the owners have been renting it because they have had tremendous difficulty in selling. It is still listed online. Say what you will, I am usually very clinical of the paranormal, and I am certainly not spiritual, but that distinct divide will stay with me forever. I believe that most things can be described, though coincidence or such like, but for me that energy will remain unexplained. It's been distinctively challenging to actually explain that property and one's experiences there, but I hope I have done so in a way that can be understood. Best wishes and Happy New Year. So my daughter, who is almost 13, has always seemed to have this kind of thing she would do when impending doom was near. The first instance was when my grandfather was sickly. He had prostate cancer. Anyway, well, one morning we were over there helping my grandmother out. My daughter was probably 5 or 6 at the time, and we were just standing around talking, and I was talking to my grandfather, and all of a sudden she comes up to me and taps me and says, "Mama, can I get in bed with grandfather?" I really didn't want her to because I was afraid she'd kick him by mistake or something. But he was like, "Yeah, you can get up here, baby." She got on the bed and had this very weird, almost sad look on her face. I didn't think anything of it. So fast forward a week later, and my grandfather died. The next one was I had to keep my friend's baby girl here while she worked, and later that day my daughter made it home from school, and me and the baby was laying in the bed. I was like 5 months pregnant, so she came and stood on the side of my bed, rubbing the back of her hair, and she had the exact same look of sadness on her face as with my grandfather. But I didn't think to put 2 and 2 together just yet. So she goes, "Mama, "Can I get in the bed with the baby?" I said yes. She lay down beside him, and she had a sad look all over her face. Well, the next week the baby was dead from SIDS. The next incident involves my grandma. She was sick, and I was feeding her, and she couldn't hardly talk, but she wanted to see my kids. So when my daughter got up to her, I looked at her face. She had the same sadness from the last 2 times. Then the next day, my grandma was dead. I'm just trying to see what other people think of this. Ever since moving to a new place a year ago, me and my boyfriend think we've witnessed some odd or paranormal things. Soon after moving in, while I was home alone, it felt like someone grabbed and pulled my ankle while I was laying in bed. Then I had a dream where I was watching myself from bird's eye view being pulled off my bed into what I can only describe as a black abyss. My boyfriend says he has seen what he thought was a shadow moving before, and sometimes feels like he is being watched. I have had a few dreams recently that felt different than nightmares. Something paranormal was actually happening to me in the dream, and it felt evil. This is different than any other nightmare I've had, where it usually was running from danger or something like that. It felt off, and well, like I said, evil. I woke up and I prayed. I have never felt like this before. It's been years since I've been a typical practicing Christian, but what's been going on at my home lately has me wondering what I should be doing to reconnect to my faith and protect myself from evil. I have been wearing my cross again, especially when sleeping. Maybe I'm just overanalyzing, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. What else can I do? I will take any advice. Thank you. It's 12 a.m. exactly. My dad pulls into our driveway after a long drive. We had just spent the weekend out of town. My dad and I both see that we left his bedroom light on, which was odd, because we usually are good with turning lights off when going on trips, and it doesn't seem like something we would forget to do. This is in the middle of the summer, so we never sleep upstairs because of how hot it gets. So we sleep downstairs with the AC running. I never liked sleeping downstairs in the living room on the couch just because I wasn't used to it, and there was more open space that I couldn't see due to the dark. I have a dream that I believe is tied to this experience in some way, because I usually don't remember my dreams. But this one I remember, plus it was an odd dream. The dream was that I had gotten out of the shower, and for some reason the shower light wasn't on. So I tried turning it on, and it would not turn on. Here is where stuff really goes down. I wake up with my eyes closed, and I can move perfectly fine. All of a sudden, I feel a sharp, deep pain in both of my spleens, as if someone was slowly stabbing both of my spleens at the same time. I just lay there and start thinking, oh, not again. I thought, oh, not again, because I have had spleen targeted before in other smaller experiences. The more time passes, the more it hurts. It gets to a point to where it hurts so much that I start to scream, but I can't. Nothing comes out. All I can do is open my mouth and make a noise that sounded like I was being strangled, and I couldn't breathe through my mouth, even though I could breathe just fine. As soon as I start to yell, the pain stops, and I am petrified. And whenever I get scared, I usually pretend to sleep, so that's what I did, and I eventually fall back to sleep. P.S. The pain only went for about 6 to 7 seconds until I tried to yell. My thoughts are, I have no idea how to explain that night. I am young still, a teen, so I don't know if this is just my mind. But I've had experience like this, but just not as bad. Like I would have dreams, and in the dream, my spleen would hurt and I can actually feel the pain. Even when I wake up, I feel the pain in my spleen a little bit. I'm writing to share my experience and maybe get some answers. Feel free to ask any questions or state any concerns. For a bit of context, my father died in a car crash when I was 11. My parents split up when I was 1. Both moved to places far apart, but they still got along pretty well. Prior to my birth, my dad used to stay over at my grandma's, Mom's mom, pretty often. It happened sometime after my dad had died, less than a year for sure. I was over at my grandma's. Her apartment is on 2 floors. The one on top is organized in a big open spacious area broken up by some closets creating a semi-octagon hollow corridor. There are a couple of mirrors. The whole area serves as an introduction to the bedroom. Pretty big room with a big double bed in the center and a TV right next to the door. Sitting on the bed, you could get a clear view of the screen, plus part of the corridor, the mirrors, and the ending part of the open space. So I was sitting on the bed watching some cartoons when in my peripheral view, I caught a shadow crossing the mirrors, the wall, walking the last part of the open space area, and disappear into the wall. The shadow resembled the figure of a man. You could see the outline of slightly messy hair, a nose, and a chin. It was like a side view of a man crossing my grand's apartment. I called to my gran and she answered from the kitchen, which is on the bottom floor. It was just the 2 of us at home. I jumped, standing, and ran downstairs. When I told her about what had just happened, she said it was probably my dad paying me a visit, and that I should not worry about it. It couldn't have been her, as the stairs are both really noisy and vertically built. The steps are attached to a pole. Plus, she was already downstairs. My grandpa leaves at 7 a.m. and comes back around 8 p.m., so it surely wasn't him. And after that one time, I never saw the shadow again. I'm not a skeptic, but not a believer either. Yet I can find no rational explanation to this event. What do you think? The first time I ever stayed overnight at an old cemetery was in the town that I grew up in. My friends and I snuck out of the house and met up at the cemetery. The part of the United States I live in doesn't have a super long history, say like the East Coast or Europe. But in the area there used to be Native Americans, and early graves were there from just after the Civil War era, like late 1870s. The gates around the cemetery were low at some points, so we would just hop over, and we ended up by a statue that was like an angel in mourning. It was like about 10 feet tall, and you couldn't see the face, all white stone marble. The thing about the statue was, it was said to be a haunted cemetery, and that strange things happened to the statue at night, mostly stories from older teens passed down. We picked that area and brought a couple of candles and a small flashlight for light. It was a bit windy, and even though our candle was in the glass jar, it kept blowing out. Some of our friends moved over to the newer mausoleum area and sat on the marble benches to have the candlelight. A couple of them had enough and ran back home. I opted to stay seated under the statue until just before dawn, as I knew my mom would get up and know I wasn't there. I had a little throwaway flashlight, as I didn't want to attract any attention by any cars driving late at night, even though I doubted they could see it from the street, as the cemetery had slight hills. At just before 3 a.m., everyone left and went back home, but I opted to stay I sat there under the statue all alone. In the distance, I hear animals, which wasn't out of the question for the area. I was afraid of a coyote or mountain lion, but not really, and had a plan to run to the mausoleum, as there was a section that had a gate that closed with like a doorknob but didn't lock. Shortly before 5 a.m., my brain started playing tricks with me. As I swore, the statue moved its head and hands several times. I jumped and turned the flashlight. There was also a faint light that went slowly off and on, but it wasn't like headlights, almost like a candle being blown out. At first, I thought it was my friend playing a trick on me. The light never came closer or moved in any direction. Eventually, I got up and ran home, but there is where I got the most unnerved. I ran through the cemetery, then had a sudden feeling like I was being chased. The part of the cemetery I was heading for was towards the new section, as that would have led me to the street closer to my house. Suddenly I changed direction and went to the nearest fence with the street access, but as I ran in that direction, I had forgot that section had older chain link fence, and so I cut again back towards east, and when I eventually hopped the wrought iron fence, I felt like something was going to pull me back in. I kept running home, and afraid to look back. Can't explain what caused me to lose it at the very end, but I felt like I was going to throw up, because my mouth was so dry, and I was covered in sweat. I did stop when I reached the opening to my street, and there was a stop sign. I grabbed it. My mouth was just so dry, my heart was pounding in my throat. When I was sure I wouldn't make a sound, I went home and stripped off my clothes in the garage, as they were all dirty, and it would have been more natural if my parents saw me in my boxers and sweaty, dirty jeans and sneakers. I went to the kitchen and drank what seemed like 10 glasses of water. I went to my upstairs room very quietly, and the next morning my mom asked if I had gotten up earlier that morning. She said she thought she heard crying. I just said I got up because I was thirsty and that I wasn't crying. She said, yeah, I know it wasn't you, but thought you were watching TV upstairs. I never told my friends the end part of what happened. Just that I waited till morning and went home. I didn't tell them about my freak out, the water, or my mom hearing someone crying. Me and my partner moved in this flat at the end of last January. It's a fairly new flat, part of a block of flats. First thing we noticed after a few weeks is the fridge, brand new, would beep insistently at night and changing temperature on its own, as if someone is pressing the buttons. It would stay silent all day and would start beeping at night. Or it would be quiet for weeks and then suddenly start beeping when one of us was in the room. We dismissed it as a faulty item. Then we had the toaster being found unplugged in the morning and hot as hell. While we were both positive it had been unplugged the night before, we moved the toaster on top of the fridge when not in use. Shoes started falling from the shoe rack in the middle of the night, same as the toilet paper holder. Google Nest came to life in the bedroom while no one was in there and played an Italian song I've never heard. I'm originally from Italy. While the activity log read unknown voice, said, play my favorite song. That freaked the shit out of us. We had the Xbox and the TV turning off and on their own. I lost a t-shirt. Alice in Chains' Last Tour t-shirt. Pretty particular during laundry. As I was going through all the clothes coming out of the dryer, I found some long male underwear which neither me or my boyfriend ever saw before. We literally went over every single nook of the flat looking for that t-shirt. No luck. 2 months later, my boyfriend is doing his laundry, and surprise, the t-shirt pops out of the dryer like nothing ever happened. Fresh as fuck, like, what? Last thing, 2 nights ago, we were on the couch watching a movie, each at one corner, and a voice could clearly be heard in between us. I think I heard a laugh. My partner says it was more like a hello. Each of us turned to watch the other, but none of us had spoken. We're pretty freaked out by now, but still dismissing everything as coincidences, as we're pretty rational people. Also, he keeps having nightmares about ghosts haunting the flat, and he woke me up screaming more than once. What do you think? Should we be worried? Thanks in advance for any advice. So, I have recently returned to the home where I grew up my entire life, and I have always known there was something paranormal in that house, but I didn't realize the extent of it until leaving and coming back. So to preface, I used to have extreme night terrors almost every night in that house, but I just chalked it up to being a kid who was easily scared and having it bleed over into my sleep. But upon returning and staying for a while, they were back, and worse than before. The first night I dreamt that I had woken up and that something had crawled across my feet and was grabbing me and trying to pull me. The second night was worse, in my opinion, because the pulling continued, but something was standing at the foot of my bed and was so tall its head hit the ceiling. I couldn't make out any features, but I knew it was staring at me. And on top of that, my vanity mirror had lights shooting in and out of it, and that looked like hands coming out of it. I have had many experiences in that house besides that, and I have been grabbed many times while being fully aware and awake. My mom also had extreme night terrors, and I would see human figures crawl across her ceiling and in her closet. A side note about my room, there has always been a cold spot at the end of my bed where I saw a figure standing, and no matter what time of year, it is always there. Also, when I was growing up, we had multiple dogs and cats, and all of them avoided my room and would only go in if forced to. And if locked in, they would whine and cry and scratch at the door and would stare at absolutely nothing. The entire house had a bad feeling, but my room is by far the worst. I don't know what it is, and would like to know if anyone has any thoughts or opinions. Thank you. This happened this morning. I was sleeping, and just for context, my bed is a single bed, and it is pushed right up against my wall, but the head of my bed is by my door. I always fall asleep facing the wall as I feel more comfortable that way. Anyways, about 5 a.m. this morning, I got awoken to what felt like someone sitting on my bed by my legs. It wasn't a case of I was half asleep and half awake, because it woke me up, and when I was awoken, I could still feel it on my bed, as if someone was still sitting there. My door makes a slight creaking when it opens and closes, so that would have woken me up if, for example, one of my family members had come into my room. I'm not sure why they would come into my room and sit on my bed at 5 a.m., as I was sleeping. I didn't check to see who was sitting there, because if nothing was there, I think it would have freaked me out more than something being there. So I pretended I didn't feel anything and just lied still for about 30 minutes to an hour. Eventually, I fell back to sleep. I asked my brother and my father just in case, but they both said no, they hadn't been in my room at all. I have no idea what sat on my bed this morning. As a stuck teenager during lockdown, I was looking for ways to spend my time. Often I used to listen to various podcasts, play games, etc. But one day I came across a ghost podcast, where people would mail their stories and the podcaster would read it out. Everything was going good until the specific podcast. I recall it like it was yesterday. It was 10 p.m. and the new video had just dropped. I was exhausted, so decided to put my earphones in and go to bed. The podcast went good until the podcaster came across a particular story. The story was about a boy who was listening to the podcast, and suddenly he had a paranormal experience. And when this story was going on, the picture of God in my room falls, and boom, it creates a loud noise. Suddenly I woke up. I thought it was by accident, so I decided just to shake it off. After some time, I felt someone sleeping right next to me. I couldn't see anyone, but it was dark. But I felt the heavy breathing and could hear the things in my room falling. When I got up to check, everything seems normal, and when the light goes off, the sound and the heavy breathing starts. I rush to my parents' room and sleep on the floor and fall asleep. In the morning, my dad woke up and inquired what I was doing sleeping on the floor. I explained to him, saying the picture of God fell down when I was sleeping, so I got scared and I got in the room. But my dad looks at me in surprise and says, when he entered the room, the picture of God was hanging on the wall. So I think it's me hallucinating, so I just laugh it off. So in the morning, I sit and listen to the same podcast I had left in the middle. But to my surprise, the story of the boy who experienced paranormal activity after listening to the podcast wasn't there. After that, I stopped listening to that podcast. I never really experienced anything scary or paranormal, but I'm a spiritual being. I believe in my spirit guide's spiritual team. Today I was in my room, and I was about to close my window. My door opened. I thought it was either my niece or the other kids, but I opened the door, and no one was there. Then I thought to myself, maybe it's something else. So I closed the door, right? And it opened again. After that, I put my hand over the door, and the door opened. But I felt some resistance, like pushing, as if someone was on the other side, pushing it gently. I got kind of paranoid, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Now I can't sleep without having the light on. This isn't the first time this happened either, but the other times it happened, the door only opened once, never again. But this time it freaked me out. Any idea why the door opened? And why did I feel resistance as if someone was pushing the door open? Come on, I better not have ghosts in my house. Hello everyone, this is my first post, so please no bashing. As the title says, this is about a lady in white. I genuinely don't know how else to describe her. Some info before I drop the actual story. I don't yet know if I believe in ghosts or not. I've had quite a lot of experiences as a child up to the age of 14, and something in me just knows that it was not fantasy. But I guess something in me wants it to be. Most of the experiences were scary. The only person I can talk to about this is my boyfriend, who is not a believer of anything but life itself. I at least believe that there is life after death. I do believe that after death there definitely is something. May it be reincarnation or whatever. So you see why I'm looking for answers. I am here. The reason I need to talk about this is fear of something happening again, I guess, as I am out to soon move to the place where I saw something for the first time. Looking back at my life, I can say that I remember more things from my early childhood, earliest memory starts at 2.5, than I remember from when I was 8 to 15. Up to this day, there's still times I talk about my favorite memories with my parents, and we have a, how do you remember that? You're only blank years old. Anyhow, enough chit-chat. Here goes nothing. So as a toddler, my parents were struggling financially, as I wasn't quite planned. They were working double jobs at night. They both worked at the same gas station, meaning I would spend a lot of nights at my grandparents' place. I never met my actual grandmas. Both died when my parents were between the ages of 16 and 17, and both of my granddads married again. The apartment in which my grandparents' mother's side lived in is the apartment where my mom grew up in, so it's been in the family for quite some time. My actual grandmother died in it, if that matters. She was found dead, and apparently it was a natural death, but everyone who knew her said she was in an unhappy marriage. I remember that one night I was sleeping over at that house. I must have been 4 or 5. I absolutely loved my not actual grandma and my grandpa, and they loved me. I was always happy spending time there, even though there was another room with a bed in it. I would always sleep between them and their bedrooms at night. The house was about 500 meters away from the next church, and churches in Germany ring at every hour, middle of the night or not. I can't remember how many times it rung, but I remember that the bell woke me up for the first time ever that night. I do not know that it rang more than one time though, which means it was a full hour ringing. When I opened my eyes, I saw a lady in a long white dress at the end of the bed, smiling and staring at me. She had long wavy hair, had a kind of glow, meaning I could see her and her facial features very clearly in the dark room. And she was calling my name and reaching her arms out. I started breathing very shakily and just about to cry, and she continued. Now she was telling me to go to her, that she was my mother. I vividly remember being really afraid. I started crying in panic and repeating, "You are not my mama. You are not my mama," until I woke up my grandma. The moment she opened her eyes, the ghost disappeared, and that was the last time I saw it. It was a long time, and a hot chocolate for me to calm down and go back to bed. Now here's the part that creeps me out even more. When I went to the kindergarten the weekend after that, I told my friends about it. They just shrugged it off and told me they've all seen her, that it was normal. Now, of course, that may be just a kid thing of wanting to be included, but up to this day, I found it really fucked up. The reason why I'm only coming out with this story now is because my grandma will be moving out soon, and my boyfriend and I will be moving in. We're moving in because financial reasons. Since it's my family's apartment, we will be paying a ridiculously low price for rent. My boyfriend wants to start a new career and possibly go to university again. So the first 3 years of a new career are always tough. There's no way we're going to find a place that big with a garden. We really need a garden because we have a husky German Shepherd mix. Very active breed. So I cannot just move elsewhere. I'm kind of happy moving into the apartment as it has an emotional value to me. But it also makes me feel weird. I'm 26 now, and entering that bedroom gives me a weird feeling still to this day. I just want my mind to come to ease when thinking about the move. Has anyone in here experienced or seen something similar? Do you reckon it was all children's fantasy, or could it really have been something? Thanks for taking the time to read this. Have a good day. A couple looking for their first home together finds one that's perfect and cheaper than what it currently is on the market. It's a little worse for wear, but with a little TLC, it would be a good home that they could raise their family in. That's the start to most horror movies you'll see nowadays, but somehow not too far-fetched, right? My girlfriend Sarah and I were that couple. We are young, in love, and wanted to live together so badly that we gathered up what little money we had to find our own place. Honestly, I was content with an apartment in the middle of town, but she convinced me that a mortgage would be cheaper and assured me it would be worth it in the long run. I wanted to rip my hair out as we searched for a house that we wanted within our price range. Everything was so ridiculously overpriced that we almost gave up until we got a phone call from my mom. She had heard from a friend of a friend who knew someone that was putting their house up for sale. We called the number that she had texted us, and we talked to the previous owner, Joseph. On the phone, we were met with a jovial, husky voice of a man who told us that the house had originally belonged to his uncle. Joseph's uncle had left the house to him, but he had no need for it and wanted to sell it. Sarah and I were trying to contain our excitement when he told us how much he wanted for the home, so we quickly made arrangements to check the house out before we made any deals. The following morning, we went to the address he had sent us. The house was in a rural area, about 30 minutes away from town, and when we got there, we were in awe. It was so picturesque, with its long gravel driveway that led us to the beautiful faded white farmhouse. To be honest, I was still in shock at the price Joseph had set. This was a lot of house and land. There had to be something wrong with it, right? When we reached the house, there was a small red truck parked at the end of the driveway. A burly man dressed in jeans and a red flannel shirt stood at the front steps looking up towards the house. We got out of our car, and we called out a greeting to him. But he didn't break his gaze until we got a couple of steps away from him. He turned to look at us and shook his head a bit, as if he were shaking himself from a trance. "Oh, sorry about that. Haven't had my coffee yet," he said as he turned to face us, flashing us a cheerful grin. "So what do you think? Quite a beauty, huh?" "Oh, it's so cute," Sarah answered as she stepped beside me. I let out an awkward chuckle as I responded, "Yeah, it's almost too good to be true." Joseph looked at the both of us, then back towards the house. "Yeah, well, it'd be a shame to let such a good house go to waste, and I know how hard it is to get a house these days. Anyways, come on, let me show you around." We followed him up a couple of steps and through the front door. He gave us a bit of history as he showed us around the house. It was built in the mid-'80s by the family of his uncle's wife. They moved in after they had married to take care of her parents. Up until they had passed, they stuck around, didn't have a family of their own, and Joseph told me that they had both also died here. I turned to look at my wife to see that she was pale as a sheet. "So, people have died here?" Sarah said in a low voice. Joseph, smiling, face suddenly dropped as she asked the question. He forced a smile and asked, "Oh, is that a problem?" Before she could respond, I cut in with a sharp, "Oh no, not at all." Her face looked up at me with a mix of shock and anger as she grabbed my arm to pull me to the side. "Are you fucking serious right now?" she shouted at me under her breath. I wanted to say that she was overreacting, but I didn't want to dig my own grave, so I responded as calmly as I could. "Listen, babe. We have been searching for months, and this is the best deal we could possibly get." Sarah's face turned full anger, and I braced myself for impact. We excused ourselves from Joseph for about 10 minutes as we walked outside to weigh our options. Ultimately, we decided to go on with the tour and decided from here. We went back inside the home and looked around to find Joseph, but we couldn't find him. We figured he must have gone upstairs, so we went up to look around the few bedrooms and still no trace of him. At this point, we have given ourselves our own tour. That's when we stepped into the kitchen to find the door that led down to a basement. He had to be down there. The lights were on, so with Sarah behind me, we cautiously made our way down to the basement. Each of our steps caused the old wood underneath to creak so loudly it was as if they were screaming as we made our way down. When we finally made it to the bottom, we turned to find Joseph standing in the center of the empty basement, staring at a dirty wall. I slowly stepped behind him, calling out to him as I got closer to him, but he didn't respond. I took a hand and placed it upon his left shoulder to grab his attention. "Hey man, are you okay?" I asked wearily. Again, he jolted out of a trance and looked back at me. "Oh, sorry, I was doing some math in my head. I found a bit of water damage on the walls here, so I was going to take it off my asking price for you." I looked at the wall, and sure enough, there was some discoloration on the pale white surface. It didn't look like mold. I'm not sure how else to explain it, aside from faint black splotches of ink. I looked back to Joseph, and he offered to continue the rest of the tour of the home. Sarah seemed a bit more reluctant, but we agreed and continued showing us the rest of the house. The only thing that fell off was Joseph's odd behavior. Every now and then his words would trail off as he shifted his attention towards the walls. The three of us walked outside, and Joseph turned to us. "So, what'd you think?" Sarah looked at him, then looked at me. Well, honestly, the fact that a few people died here is a bit unsettling. Joseph's grin quickly shifted into a frown. "Oh, I can assure you this old place is worth the buy. On that note, let me change up the offer a bit." Our jaws nearly dropped when he told us how much cheaper price than we first talked about. He told us that he noticed this place would definitely be a fixer-upper, and that he'd be more than happy to know that his place would be going to good hands. Sarah and I talked a bit with our budget and the price of the house. We'd be saving so much money. I shook Joseph's hand, and we quickly got the paperwork situated. A couple of weeks later, everything we owned was packed into a moving truck, and we headed towards our new home. We didn't have much, so Sarah and I did everything by ourselves. We were so excited to finally move in that maybe that gave us strength. Thanks to all of the money we saved and Joseph's generous offer, we were able to get some furniture delivered, but that was going to take a bit longer, so all we had was my mattress. We decided to drop off all of our boxes into the living room, then decided where everything goes afterwards. As I was placing a box down, I couldn't help but notice something on the wall. I stopped Sarah as she dropped off a box behind me. "Hey, are you seeing what I'm seeing?" I asked as I pointed at a wall in the living room. She followed the direction of my finger and saw that on the wall, what looked like a very faint black stain that looked eerily similar to a face. I stepped closer to the wall, and sure enough, there was what looked like outlines of a head, long hair that had stretched like tentacles, two beady eyes and pursed lips. I know that the human eyes tries to find faces and things, but this was uncanny. I placed my hand upon the image on the wall. I felt cold stings underneath my fingertips. Sarah let out a little chuckle. Fixer-uppers, right? We'll paint over it or something. Yeah, absolutely, I said as I felt a wave of unease as I stared at the stain on the wall. It looked as though the face, or what looked like a face, its eyes were staring at me. We continued the rest of the day unpacking and putting things in their new spots. It goes without saying that we were completely exhausted. That afternoon, we went back to the town to grab dinner. We raised our glasses to a job well done and chowed down on some food. I tried to shake this feeling of unease, but in my mind I kept remembering that damn stain on the wall. That face. It was around 8 o'clock when we finally returned to the house to see that the front door was wide open and all the lights were on. I told Sarah to call the cops. I rushed inside the house to see if there was an intruder. I looked through every inch of the house and nothing seemed out of place. I didn't find anyone at all. I went down the stairs into the basement, and I froze in place as I looked on the wall. The stains on the wall, there were now faces, about 6 of them, now formed on the wall of the basement that Joseph was staring at. Despite being a faint outline, I could make out the same feature on each one. All of them were staring at me, and each one of them had their mouths open in a silent scream. "Honey," Sarah called to me from upstairs, and I heard another set of footsteps with hers. I went back upstairs to see Sarah with a police officer. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and told me that I had been gone for so long that she had the officer look around for me. The officer stuck around for a while as I told him what had happened, and despite what we found, nothing seemed to be stolen. He assured us to call him if anything came up and told us to have a good night. After that scare, a good night was the last thing we would have. Sarah was upstairs taking a shower, and I sat on the floor of the unfurnished living room staring at the walls. The face that I had seen earlier there was now gone. I didn't tell Sarah about the faces I had seen. I'm sure I was just tired from all the moving. I even went back to the basement, and sure enough, there weren't any faces on the walls. I laughed to myself and went upstairs to the master bedroom. I saw Sarah standing in the bathroom with a towel wrapped around her. I tried to be cool and walked towards her, wrapping my arms around her when I noticed that she was shaking. I spun her around and saw her eyes were wide with absolute terror. I asked her what happened, and after a couple of minutes, she told me that while she was taking a shower, she felt someone was watching her. She thought that it was me, but when she turned around, she didn't see anything. She dropped her towel to show me where she felt something grab her, and on the midsection of her back, there was a faint black outline of a hand. Sarah asked if I saw anything, and I did my best to assure her that things would be okay, and that we must be really tired. She reluctantly agreed. Maybe we'd feel better in the morning after a good night's sleep. I gave her a hug, and I looked behind her in the bathroom, and I saw another face staring back at me. But it was smiling. In my sleep, I had dreamt that I was laying atop the mattress when I started to feel cold. I looked down to see the outlines of hands within the darkness of my bedroom wrapping their fingers around me, each bony finger pressing into my skin, squeezing me. My legs, arms, torso, and throat are gripped by countless cold hands. I forced my neck to turn towards Sarah, but the icy grips that were on me forced my head to look up towards the ceiling, cold fingers prying my eyes open to see. On the ceiling staring down at me were so many faces. No longer outlines, they were so vivid, each face with a different, pained expression on them, with one man's face looking down at me with a smile. I woke the next morning. My body was shivering as I lifted myself up from the mattress. I looked over to Sarah, who was still fast asleep. I tried to take it in tranquil sight of her resting, until I looked around the room. It was as if someone had covered their hands in black powder and pressed their hands all around the walls. Handprints of all sizes, pitch black sprawling across every corner of the bedroom. I looked back up towards the ceiling to see that it was completely covered with the dark outlines of screaming faces. I shook Sarah awake. I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. And when she opened her eyes, I told her about the faces I had been seeing. Her face turned into such a pained look as she told me to look around the room. The walls were completely empty. I went to the nearest hardware store and bought so much white paint. As soon as I got back to the house, I picked up a roller and started frantically painting the walls. We spend days painting the entire inside of the house, but those damn stains, those fucking faces keep coming back. Every night that I've slept, I've had the same dream of cold hands gripping onto me. Lately I've been hearing something, whispers coming from the walls telling me to stay in the house, to be with the house. Have I finally gone crazy? Sarah suggested that we move out, but we had put so much money into this and I refused to let whatever this keep coming back. I am not going to let go of this house. It's mine. Sarah's telling me that she is afraid, but she doesn't understand that I'm afraid too. I see them everywhere. They're constantly watching us, and I'm more afraid of what happens to us if they hear us talking about leaving again. Back in 1997, I was asked by my manager to help him move out of his mom's old house. I figured as long as I'm getting paid, no problem. I knew she had died and him being the oldest son was taking care of her at her house. He was a man in his 50s, so his mother had been living in the house since the late 1950s to 60s by the look of the stuff. I was to bring out the stuff from the bedrooms into the large living room, and then he would tell me what went in the truck and what went in the garage. I would take out everything from the bedroom, then sort the closet. In every bedroom, I would do that. I would turn from the closet and step on something that had not been there before, like a toy car or a rolling pin. There was a box in the living room next to the phone, and I could feel some very unwelcoming vibes coming from it. On the third bedroom, he wanted me to take the side tables the box was lying on to the garage. I did and asked where you want the box. He said just put it over there on the couch. I did and I cleared the third bedroom. On the way out of the closet, I looked around and didn't see anything to trip on. I carried 2 boxes and tripped on a broom had been placed at the doorway out of the room. This was his mom's room, and I fell flat on my face on top of the boxes because I didn't see it because I was carrying the boxes. I had to now move the couch into the garage and put the boxes on the floor in front of the fireplace. I was almost done, and my manager was cleaning out the kitchen all this time. I was working fast now because the feeling of dead was getting to me. I had 1 closet left in the living room. When I turned with the box, I almost fell because I had stepped on a rotten banana on the floor behind me. I asked my manager, pretty angry at this point, if he had placed it there. He was a serious older man. It was like, you're kidding me, right? I was like, forget it. I was done, and took the last things to the garage and moving truck. I stopped and asked him where the box by the fireplace went. It was the last thing in the house. He said, Mom goes in the garage. She left the house to my brother so he can take her. I picked it up and sure enough, it was the LA corner marked ashes and had a woman's name. I thought to myself, why you wanted me gone so badly? You probably don't know you're gone. I placed her in the garage and was very happy to be leaving. I don't believe in much ghost. In many ghost encounters I hear of or experience myself, I count them as my hallucination or any coincidence, etc. But still, this childhood event doesn't make sense to me. I tried to make many assumptions proving it could be my own imagination, but it seemed so real. Me and my sister were in our room playing, and my parents were in the TV room. Father was watching TV and Mom was in the kitchen area. It was fine when suddenly my sister saw a white translucent being with a beard and a grin on his face leaving our bathroom, which was inside our room, and moving to the TV lounge. My sister called me as I was facing backwards toward the bathroom. I didn't clearly see the whole figure, just a white part of clothing at the brink of our door, so I didn't completely believe her. After 5 to 10 minutes, my father started choking very badly, and the creature returned to our room. This time, I left the room earlier, but my sister was there. The creature this time made very evil, loud laughter that I heard, and my sister then ran out of the room after hearing it. My father, after this laughter, after choking badly, fainted, and my mom was outside calling an ambulance on phone. It's been years. Everything is fine now. My parents are still unaware of any creature or sound, but if only it was me or my sister alone, I could call it as some imagination. But we both, at different places, heard it and saw it. Although I saw just a part of the creature's clothes. We both changed our room after that and never used the bathroom. I did use it sometimes in daylight, but nothing happened. After we left home, the room and bathroom were not in use, just during monthly cleaning. One day my mother told us that while they opened the room, there were hundreds of lizards on the wall. So many that the wall was barely visible, and all in a blink of an eye rushed in a small hole outside like there was nothing there before.